And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast coming at you on a Thursday morning, May 2nd, 2024. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck, and we are coming to you with an episode of the ScoopDuck Daily where we break down kind of some of the latest headlines around Oregon football recruiting, Oregon athletics. Anything is fair game in this show. And going to get into a lot of stuff with my guy, Justin Hopkins, today. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Like I said, I'm joined by my guy, Justin Hopkins, owner and publisher of ScoopDuck with the On3 Network. How we doing, J-Hop?
Good as always, but, after you reading about Ranchito, now I'm hungry all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, they got some good stuff over there. I was able to make it over there while I was in Eugene and see Ruben and some Duck fans, so it was a good time. But you were doing a little bit of traveling yourself. How was your trip?
Yeah, good. Pretty tough to, get out of town and get to somewhere like Palm Springs where it's hovering right around 90 and sunny and beautiful and having a pool access. Pretty tough to beat. A little bit of action with Stagecoach, lots of country music, big festival. So, yeah, had a good long weekend. Trying to give my liver a couple of days off, though, however.
Fair enough. Yeah, we were like in opposite places. We kind of traded for a week. You came down to SoCal. I went up to Oregon. I already kind of missed the rain, but I know a lot of people are mixed about if they like the rain or not.
I enjoy the rain. I enjoy the seasons. I actually really do. It's one of my favorite things about Oregon is that you experience all seasons, especially in Southern Oregon. But, after, 3, 4, 5 months of kind of the rainy, cooler weather, I do get anxious for some sunshine.
There you go. Well, I'm glad you were able to soak some up, but let's dive into some of these Oregon headlines. How about it? Starting things off with the main story of the day, talking about Dana Altman and Oregon hoops. They were able to pick up a transfer portal commitment from former Villanova guard TJ Bamba, who has 1 year of eligibility remaining. 6'5", 215 pounds, originally from Bronx, New York. Averaged just over 10 points last season, 3.6 rebounds and 1.8 assists. Third pickup for Dana Altman. What do we think here, Justin?
Yeah, I don't claim to be a hoops expert. I know neither of us do, but just kind of reading the evaluation I included in the story from someone else, looks like a guy that's got a lot of bounce in his step, plays pretty good defense, can score the three, can get to the hoop if needed. Seems like exactly what, Dana Altman needed, maybe that replacement for Jermaine Couisnard, which I know that's a lot of production to replace from one player. So I'm not saying that that's the case, but certainly somebody that looks to kind of fill that role and certainly what they needed. So, right now, I think with that addition and the fact that, Kwame Evans and everybody else is basically staying, looks like a pretty dang good roster for Dana Altman. So I'll be interested to see how he gets them all to play together because that's going to be the key now.
Absolutely. And shout out to Urson Demir with that eval that you referenced, Justin. So things are kind of, I feel like for Oregon basketball, you couldn't really ask for a better offseason with the guys that they've gotten in the portal. Tony Stubblefield making a return to Eugene. You got a new court underway. I know that's kind of a polarizing topic among the Oregon fan base. Some love it, some hate it. And then now you're kind of just waiting to see what happens with this waiver for N'Faly Dante, which I think would kind of be the cherry on top at this point, no?
Yeah, that would be the absolute cherry. I think Oregon will be fine with or without Dante. Love his hustle, love his passion, would be happy to see him back at Oregon. But, with Biddle and Evans back, I think this is still a really, really good team without Dante. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens there. I guess maybe I'm just kind of setting it up because I think it's really close to that either working or not working, and everybody's unsure right now. So I think fans just saw that it was possible and are assuming it to happen, and I certainly don't think that's the case.
Well, that's why we will have to keep our ear to the ground on that one and watch for any developments with N'Faly Dante. Any other hoops news you kind of wanted to get on, or should we get to some football and recruiting?
No, I think we got plenty to talk about beyond that. So I think great news for basketball fans, but let's sell some tickets and talk football.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're a ScoopDuck reader or a listener, viewer here on YouTube, that's our bread and butter. So reminder to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. It's been taken off lately. We just passed the 800 subs mark, trying to get that thing back up to 1,000 and continue growing this community. Justin, the big story right now in the transfer portal with Oregon is former Alabama defensive back Peyton Woodyard entered the transfer portal and didn't waste any time setting a visit to Eugene. That's kind of the big story that we're tracking right now. The former St. John Bosco safety and Adidas All-American selection will be in the Northwest this weekend, and it kind of feels like Oregon's in the driver's seat here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously enters the transfer portal with a do not contact tag, and less than a week jumping in the portal, you've got us and Steve Wiltfong and Pete Nakos and everybody basically saying Oregon's the team to beat here. Oregon's the team to beat here. And then, of course, within a week, he's visiting Oregon. So you just take all those things at face value and kind of look at it. And even if you weren't an Oregon fan and we're looking at that thinking, that looks pretty good for Oregon. So got to assume, the visit means good news for the Ducks. And Dan Lanning probably has a really good finger on the pulse here. And I think, potentially Woodyard would be a perfect addition to this team, not only because of the skill set and the player, but because of the human being he is. We both know he's such a high character young man. We both know that he comes from a great background. And I know that at this point in the spring transfer window, you absolutely don't want to bring any one piece into any room that will kind of disturb, the chemistry you have in that room. And I don't think Woodyard would do that at all at Oregon.
He's been one of my favorite recruits to cover. Just an awesome guy to talk to, super respectful, and just a great kid. I think another thing that supports Oregon's momentum here is kind of what you and I were reporting a couple weeks ago about how when Jacoby Matthews entered the portal, we said, hey, pump the brakes here. We don't necessarily think that Oregon's going all in or has quite as much interest as the kind of common fan thought. And then what do you know, a little bit later on, Peyton Woodyard enters the portal, and now he's obviously being linked to Oregon. So I think that would kind of reinforce why you feel like Oregon's in a good spot here, because they're just managing this thing very diligently.
Yeah, credit to Oregon. I'm sure they obviously had an inkling that this was something that could potentially happen, but just kind of being cautious and waiting to see what happens. And I think I think Jacoby Matthews is a good player, but I think Peyton Woodyard has the capability of being a great player. So this seems like a good trade up for Oregon if that's the way we're looking at it.
If that's the way things end up shaking out for the Ducks, this is a great situation because they do need a little bit more depth, I think, at that safety spot. And Aaron Flowers looked like he was flashing in that spring game. So if you can add another guy that is kind of around that caliber, I think you're in a good spot. And the last note I'll add here, Justin, he hasn't played any college football games, but at the same time, how invaluable is it for him to have gone through spring ball and also just been an early enrollee under Nick Saban? I think that there's still some knowledge that he soaked up during that brief time in Tuscaloosa that could really help him if he does end up at Oregon or anywhere else.
No, 100%. He probably, if not going to Oregon, he probably went to the next best school you could think of. And even though, like you said, Nick Saban is not the head coach of Bama anymore, we both know he was around. We both know he was able to impart some wisdom to him before he left and probably still mentored him a little bit. So if you're a safety, cornerback, whatever, defensive back, that's a guy you definitely want to take some advice from. So, good news all around for Oregon there. And like I said, if they potentially add him, we still don't know what will transpire with the Dalen Austin situation. So, should anything there, mean that Austin's not any longer a part of the team, which we don't know, this seems to be something that would be helpful there if that's the case.
Let's stay in the transfer portal, Justin, and talk about another big name that has been on Oregon's radar. That is former Michigan State defensive lineman Derrick Harmon, who is back in the transfer portal. He's in, then he's out, now he's back in. So this has really been a trending name for Oregon fans to follow. And you got to think that they're going to try to do everything they can to land him, because D-line feels like one of the remaining needs, not a glaring need, but if you can go out and get a guy like Harmon, you get him.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's been the philosophy for Dan Lanning is, hey, we're just going to go get guys that make us better. We're not really, in the portal because we need to be. We're in the portal because we can be. And if something comes up that fits for us, we're gonna move. And I think right now, the way I see it, if you're able to get Peyton Woodyard and you're able to get Derrick Harmon, which we know, which still, I guess, the precursor to that, Oregon's in the mix. Sounds like Ohio State's in the mix. USC, Colorado. This is not a done deal. I know that maybe we'll get into it, but Ben Roberts obviously jumps in the portal from Oregon, defensive lineman. Oregon fans immediately think, oh, here's Dan managing the roster, out one and in one. I don't think that was the case. I think Ben Roberts made his decision. I think Oregon has continued to push for Harmon, but there's still work to be done there. But again, if you can get Harmon and you can get Woodyard, I'm pretty sure you're Dan Lanning. You say, I'm done. But, portal transfer, I'm done. We're headed into the season with these guys, and we'll roll from here. So would be great, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. So hopefully Duck fans are pumping the brakes a little bit there and not just counting him as a Duck just yet.
There is still work to be done in this Harmon recruitment, Justin, but fortunately for the Ducks, they've already to a degree done part of the heavy lifting, and that's getting him on campus, right? The first time around before he decided to return to Michigan State, which I think from Pete Nakos's reporting with the On3 network, I guess that's still on the table, going back to Michigan State again. So this is a crazy recruitment if I've ever seen one, and there's clearly a lot of moving parts still going on here. But Oregon's just put their head down and continued working. So I think you kind of just have to trust the staff here. And if they don't end up getting Harmon, I don't think it'll be for a lack of effort. I haven't been able to admittedly get too much intel on this one.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only intel I've gotten is that they're still working on it and there's work to be done. So it sounds to me when I hear that, Harmon's not close to a decision. So we could talk about the 5 schools, or we could talk about returning Michigan. I just don't think that this young man's that close to a decision on where he wants to go. And he doesn't have to decide this week by any means. He could take this out a month if he wanted to. So, I think just kind of staying patient there and letting the process play out is probably, the best advice for this one, because again, I don't think we're on quack watch here. I don't think this was, hey, Ben Roberts left, we're getting Derrick Harmon. That wasn't the case. This is just Oregon. Like you said, they'll keep working away. And we both know that this staff does everything they can to get, the guys that they want. And they rarely miss, but they are going to miss here and there. And that's just the way it goes. So keep chopping wood if you're Dan Lanning. And I think I do believe Oregon will be in that short list, at the end of the day when things kind of get maybe a little bit closer for Harmon.
I think one of the funny comments that I saw on the ScoopDuck boards this morning was Harmon trying to figure out where he wants to go is like asking my wife where she wants to eat. And I thought that was just hilarious. I've been really enjoying being on the boards lately and just kind of seeing the funny stuff that people have to say about Oregon football.
No, that's a perfect analogy for it, because my fiance same way. Hey, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't care. You decide. Okay, I got Yeah, so that's why we would classify Harmon as a boomerang transfer, right? Because he's already done this before, so he's one of those boomerang transfers like Caden Proctor and Kyle Ford and some of the others.
Absolutely. Well, let's stay on the D line for a second here, Justin, because the Ducks did see some attrition on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, as Ben Roberts entered the transfer portal. He's been around for a couple years now. Spent 2 years with the Ducks, signed out of the state of Utah in the class of 2022, and made some good plays in the spring game from what I saw. He was someone that I asked Dan Lanning about after the game, and he was complimentary of his development and how he's been able to hone in on his craft under Tony Tuioti, but he decided to enter the transfer portal and look for a new home. And that was one of the more shocking, not shocking, maybe that's an aggressive word. I was surprised that he hit the portal because I thought he was going to have a role this year. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And now we have an even more new look defensive line for Oregon in 24.
Yeah, I think shocking is a fair way to characterize it. Is it life altering? Absolutely not. We both know that. It's a player. It's somebody that probably was going to step up in a little bit more of a role this year. I don't think at any point was he going to push to start, but I think you were going to see him on the field, on occasion and be a part of the rotation. Oregon is going to have a few of those here and there, and they're going to be able to survive those guys. If it was maybe one of I think for me, if it's Ben Roberts, who's been in the program for a couple of years and has yet to really kind of push into that starting or, high snap count role, it's not as big of a loss as, say, somebody you signed last year that showed up as a high 4-star or 5-star that you're still developing. Roberts has had a couple of years to develop. I think it maybe feels like he's a known commodity at this point, at least with the staff. Like, okay, here's where this player's ceiling is. Here's, kind of where they're going to end up. And it's not to belittle Roberts at all. I mean, nobody is going to sit here and bash him, but I mean, I know that the staff internally wasn't like, oh my gosh, we're in panic mode. It's like, you know what, he made his decision. We wish him the best of luck, but we're gonna be fine and keep moving forward. So I think that's the way you handle it, which is obviously the opposite of how Deion Sanders would handle it. But like you said, I think the news itself was shocking, but I don't think this is a death blow by any means to Oregon.
And really, it does kind of feel like we're at the point where 2 years, you're out of school, Oregon or any other school, you haven't seen the field or carved out some kind of a role for yourself. Maybe it is time to kind of reevaluate things and from both sides, right? So we'll see what happens with Roberts. Wish him all the best. I think I got to interview him once when he committed to Oregon back in 2022. So we'll continue to see where this D line shakes out and what names ultimately comprise of that starting group, because it's going to be a new one. But I'm honestly just excited about that, because when you have so many veterans like Popo, Dorless, Mace Funa, guys like that have been around, like those were solid players, some of them great players, but I'm just kind of ready for some new faces there.
Yeah, it's definitely the next wave now. And that's, a little unsure because you don't know what you have. But at the same time, I guess what gives me confidence is we haven't seen Oregon smashing the panic button looking for edges or, defensive tackles or any, are they in on Harmon? Yeah, you kind of have to be. They've dinked around with a couple other guys, but I don't think I've seen them kind of push the hammer down, which to me indicates that they feel pretty good about this group. So
let's stay on some recruiting talk here, Justin. A couple guys we want to talk about before we get out of here. I was able to talk with Linkon Cure, the 2025 tight end out of Goodland, Kansas. He was one of the big visitors on campus for the spring game. And man, Justin, this guy just keeps saying better stuff about Oregon. It feels like every time I talk to him. Oregon's battling Kansas State in this one, but the real quote that kind of stuck out to me was I just asked him what makes Oregon different. And he said literally like everything about Oregon makes it different. And man, it's just going to be a fun recruitment to watch, because he's coming back out next month for his official visit. But it seems like Oregon's really in the thick of it here.
Yeah, it feels like more and more, the original gap here for Oregon with Cure was distance, right? It seemed like Kansas State was the big threat, and that's going to be largely because it's the home school, and I totally understand that. I mean, as somebody with a son who went to college and got a little homesick himself, I get it. I totally understand it. I'm sure you were homesick at times as well. So that's real. And so, but it sounds like more and more Cure has opened up, to the distance, to Oregon, to other schools. I think that was all that was really needed for the Ducks, because I think they've been in a pretty good spot with him for a while. So we'll see how it transpires. We know that they're big game hunting when it comes to tight end in this cycle. And if you're able to snag, Linkon Cure and Desan Brame, you're in really good shape with your tight ends for the future. So we'll see how it develops.
Yeah, Linkon Cure is going to be that big name to watch, I think, along with Brame that you mentioned at tight end. Not only because the Ducks are losing Ferguson and Herbert after this year, but also because Nate Roberts, who was previously linked to Oregon, that was a big target for them. Not a huge surprise that he ended up at Ohio State. That kind of seemed like where that one was headed. But because one of your big targets is no longer on the board, essentially, you want to make sure to double down on those guys that you really have focused on. Let's wrap up with a little bit of receiver talk, Justin, because I know you had an update on Dallas Wilson, a 5-star wideout that made it out to Oregon, committed to Oregon, obviously, but important for him to get back on campus, as we discussed leading up to that visit.
Yeah, it's Dallas Wilson, 5-star wide receiver, out of Florida. So we know that means Florida State, Miami are not going to give up, and they haven't given up, and they won't give up. Another name that kind of jumped in the mix here lately, making a push, is Texas. So that might be one to watch out for as well. But As far as Wilson goes, he is still continuing to say all the right things and talks about coming to Oregon and learning under Junior Adams and being a part of the offense and being a part of the culture. And one thing that sticks out, he really talks about being developed, and he knows he can do that at Oregon. So, I mean, there's nothing to be done here. Even if the kid came out and said, I'm 100% solid, I'm not taking any other visits. If he did that right now today, it's May. Okay. He could change his mind by June or July or August. So, I mean, you're going to be constantly monitoring this situation all the way to December, no matter what he says. But at least at this point, you still have to feel good about what he's saying right now. And that, the main thing is that he's still visiting Oregon and that he's at least communicating with media and talking about Oregon, because as we've seen maybe from like Sandman Thompson and Adrian Wilson that decommitted from Oregon, neither of those guys really did many interviews with Oregon media, weren't interacting on social media with other commits. And I think you're at least seeing that from Dallas Wilson.
Yeah, the only thing I really have to add here about Wilson, he's doing all the right things. And Oregon, I don't think Oregon's approach is changing at all. This is a perfect example of the staff is recruiting him as if he's uncommitted because they know how important he is and how talented he is in terms of what they want to do in the bigger picture here. So I thought it was interesting that Texas got involved, but are we really that surprised? I mean, Sark's going after the best that he can possibly find. The last guy I want to talk about here, Justin, just while I have you, is Marcus Harris, who made it out for another visit for Oregon. And I mean, this guy's been to Oregon what feels like a million times now, given the presence that Oregon has at modern day. And he's going to be making an official visit next month. But he gave me the dream school quote, but it really does feel legitimate with him. So I think Oregon's in an awesome spot there. The only thing that kind of comes to mind for me is just where does he fall on their big board, because you have a lot of big name receivers that they're still going after.
Yeah, the one thing I love about, Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco's approach to recruiting is they love to give themselves options, right? And so, to a common fan or maybe somebody outside of the Oregon market, they'll look at it and let's say for whatever reason, Oregon maybe just holds off on Marcus Harris because they have other guys on the board or whatever the case might be. They're going to, the narrative will be, oh, Oregon whiffed on Marcus Harris, which we both know might not necessarily be the case. Great player, good player. Oregon's already got several wide receivers committed. They signed a fantastic class in 2024. So we know that they don't need massive numbers in this class if they don't want. There's always receivers in the transfer portal if you need to go that route, but it doesn't look like Oregon does. So I mean, at least to me with Marcus Harris, really good player. I love that Oregon's in the top 5 or on the short list. Again, giving themselves options, and we could go on, but we both know Oregon's recruiting DeCorian Moore at a high level and definitely in the game there. We could talk about athlete Michael Terry. We could talk about speedster Chris Lawson. There's even others that we could continue to talk about, but you get my point. These are all names of guys that are more than likely maybe fighting for one spot left, including Marcus Harris. So that's 4 or 5 guys just off the top of my head, and of course, like DeCorian Moore, yeah, you're not going to ever turn away a DeCorian Moore. But, if it comes down to Chris Lawson and Marcus Harris, and they both want to commit in 2 days, does Oregon take both? Do they just take one? How do they proceed? So these are questions we're not answering today, but at least, putting it on the radar of fans so that, whatever might happen in the future, you're at least kind of prepared for the news. Again, great player. Love that Oregon's in the game, keeping themselves in the game. But I'm going to be I think wide receiver is one of the more interesting position groups for me this cycle and how it plays out, down the road here.
Definitely, because it's already one of those positions that I don't know if I'd say fleshed out, but you already have so much work that you've completed. So you have the luxury of being selective. And then a question like, where does Michael Terry ultimately slot into this Oregon offense if he comes to Oregon? Same question can be asked for Chris Lawson, although he might even end up being a DB. Like, he's that talented that is kind of in the discussion here as we monitor that recruitment. But Justin, we've hit on some amazing stuff here. Already got almost 25 minutes. But before we get out of here, just any final thoughts, and wanted to, ask you where the fans can find you, because I'm grateful to have you on the channel and the pod.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, of course, they can follow our work, both of our work on ScoopDuck, which is quite honestly, that's the best way to support us. If you like what Max is doing, if you enjoy what I'm doing, and you want us to stay active in this market doing this as our day jobs, it's, support's required. So, right now you can try us out, read all our content for $1 for a month and decide if you like it or not. And if you do, that's great. That helps support us. Support through YouTube like we're doing here, and the other channels is great as well. But, nothing beats buying a subscription. $10 a month. I would say that probably 90% of people on here can afford that, because that's a Dutch Bros drink a day, or whatever the case might be. So, but yeah, thank you all for the support. I'm so glad that the feedback of Max joining us at ScoopDuck has been overwhelming. I love the relationship you and I have developed, the working relationship that we've been able to come up with already, and the chemistry. So again, just thankful for all the feedback, and if you can, do your best to support us, because we'll be happy to keep doing this as long as you support us.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, if you guys want to follow Oregon football recruiting, this is the place to be. It really is, over at ScoopDuck. So check us out. You also get Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons, two of the best national insiders in the entire business. But if you want to lock in with me, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at mtorresports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck YouTube channel. Let us know what you're thinking about Oregon football and recruiting. And then also share the show, share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. But big thank you to Justin for coming on. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.